Hello, geometry students. Welcome to the final lesson for chapter 11 on graphing circles. Might even be for some of you the very last lesson of the entire geometry year. So praise the Lord. Let's jump right in. It's a pretty quick one. And it just gives us some tips for how to graph circles, which without having a simple lesson could look confusing. But hopefully after the next few minutes and going over this in class, you'll see this. It's fairly straightforward. And so that's why I think it's important that we cover it, because it's not too hard to pick up once you know what you're doing. So let's look at our definition. And there's just the one definition, and that is the equation of a circle. When we're graphing lines, we had y equals mx plus b, and m and b represented key things for graphing straight lines like slope and slope y-intercept. If you've graphed quadratics yet, you know there's a formula for that kind of tells you where the vertex goes and whether which way it opens, the parabola, and how wide it is. And so the same thing for a circle. And so we get this equation right here. It's x minus h squared plus, and I can see I left something off, y minus k squared equals r squared. And again, that can kind of look overwhelming at first, but let's just break it down. Basically, you have the two things in parentheses. Those are whenever you see x in an equation, that is what shifts your shape, whether it's a line, parabola, or a circle. It shifts it along the x-axis. Wherever you see the y, that is what shifts your line or your graph up and down along the y-axis. So what's happening to x affects your graph this way. They're kind of like toggling switches that help you take a shape and then kind of morph it in different ways, kind of change it. So x goes left and right, y goes up and down, and then r's we'll see has to do with the radius. So when you look at letters H and K, that is the center of your circle. So in a very basic form, the most basic formula of this would be like x squared plus y squared equals r squared. Oh, yeah. Actually, well, I would say maybe not even that would be equals 1. Okay, that would be kind of like your most basic circle, because what that tells you is nothing's being done to x, there's no h, there's no k, nothing's being done to y, and your radius is just the square root of 1, which is 1. And so that would be a circle right here, where its center would be right in the center, right in the middle, right on the origin, and then you would have a simple radius of just 1. Okay, and it would look something like that. Then from that point on, anything that I do to h, k, or r is going to shift the circle left or right, x, y is going to shift it up and down, and anything I do to that r is going to grow or shrink the radius of my circle. So for example, over here, I've graphed a little circle, and we can take a look at it and write the equation from it. And we can see this is not on the origin. We can see the center of this circle is at over 1. So it goes over 1 and up 1, 2, and up 2. So that means that the center of the circle has been shifted 1 to the right and 2 up. We can also see the radius is 1, 2, 3. So we have a radius of 3. So if I were to put that in the equation of a circle, we could simply say, okay, well, what happened to x? X was shifted 1 to the right, so that's x minus 1 squared, plus y was shifted 2 upward, so that's y minus 2 squared. And then what is my radius? My radius is 3, so then I need to square that, and it would be 9. And so there, very quickly from a picture, I can get a graph. Or we'll also do it, if I were to see that equation, I could very quickly go from an equation to the graph, knowing what h, k, and r each represent. I should go ahead and switch to blue here. And this right here should say radius. Okay. And so just remember, h toggles x this way, k toggles y this way, and r is the radius, and it's r squared. So you got whatever you see there, you have to square root, and that's your radius. The other thing you might note is that it says x minus h and x minus k. That's just so you know that if you see a positive number there, it's actually a negative, and if you see a negative number there, it's actually positive. That's why in the little example I did right here, you can see that the coordinates of the center were +1, +2, So in the equation, it's -1, -2. And there's a question at the end that I reinforce this, but it is kind of the opposite of what you would think. That negative, when you see x -1, don't think that's 1 to the left. When you see x -1, that's actually 1 to the right. Okay, let's do some examples, see if we can continue to make sense of circled equations. So the first equation is just practicing. Say I have a circle and I want its center to be at 4, -2, and I want it to have a radius 3. What would its equation be? Well, okay, let's just identify our h, k, and r. So here's my h. It's the first number. So what I need to do to the x is I need to make it go up. I'm sorry, to the right 4. So that means it's going to be -4. And then my k is right here. That is the -2. That means I'm going to have it go 2 down. And so that means I need a +2 there. And then if my radius is 3, the whole equation is going to equal 3 squared, or it's going to equal 9. And so I can write this equation, x -4 squared plus y plus 2 squared equals 9. And there's my equation. And right there I can see that the center of the circle is +4, -2, and then my radius is the square root of 9 right there. Okay? So you'll see you'll get very fast at this, and that's why at first it might look overwhelming, but it's a fairly simple lesson. As you keep pressing through. It's okay if you're still confused. Okay? And so that's the other thing maybe I forgot to mention up here. Oh yeah, no, I have it there. Your center can always be written as HK. And so that's why when here it said the center's 4, -2, I immediately said, oh, that first number is my H change. That second number is my K change. Okay, and so question number 2 is kind of the opposite practice. We have the equation. Now let's go ahead and graph it. And let's go ahead and identify the center and the radius, which we have to do in order to graph it. All right, so let's see our, I guess first let's go ahead and get some axes here. Okay, so our center is, and I've kind of, let's see, maybe I got to double check see if I wrote this correctly. Sorry. It said y +1 and x -3. So I didn't want to get those backwards. So y is your vertical change and x is your horizontal change. So my h is actually +3 here. And my y is actually negative, or my k is actually -1 here. So that means this has a center at 3, -1. So if I go over 3, 1, 2, 3, and down 1, that's the center right there of my circle. Here's my x-axis. Here's my y-axis. All right, and then what's my radius? Well, let's just square root that. So my radius must equal 5. So that just means the circle from the center then radiates 5 points in all directions. So I know it starts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up here, and then it's going to go 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if I can draw this a little better. And it's going to go 5 down, and then 5 there. Watch, I can even do it this way just to make sure I get it right. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the top is right there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The other side's right about there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The bottom's right about there. And that's close enough. So you have a center at 3, -1. And I have a radius of 1, 2, 3, 4. Mine's a little off because I was trying to do the fancy circle. But I have a radius of 5. So very, very simple and straightforward. Again, notice compared to our normal equation, the x and the y are switched. So just make sure x moves this way, y, just like x and y axis, moves this way. All right, and then my last question here is just the reminder of here's the formula or the equation of a circle, in that you always have this minus h and this minus k. So always just remember that the coordinates always have the opposite sign. That can be a little confusing at first. And I won't get into the algebra of y at this point. But the coordinates always have the opposite sign. So if you see, as we did up here, x or y +1, then that means that's actually y -1. And then if you see, or it's going to be k is negative 1. If you see x minus 3, then that means h is positive 3. So just always remember you're going to go with this opposite because the negative is kind of built into the equation. So if you see a positive, that means there's a double negative. If you see a negative, that means it's actually positive, which I know makes perfect sense. So watch out, and I'll reinforce this in class. So let's graph some circles, either finding the circle and writing the equation, or having the equation and then graphing and finding the centers and the radius. You can definitely do it. All right, see you soon. We'll have some fun.